This video is going to examine the AutoCAD Linetype file, how line types are created and used in AutoCAD, and then we'll do some simple line types, how to create our own and load them into AutoCAD. Let's begin by looking at AutoCAD and how it uses line types. The easiest way to get to loading and looking at line types is to type in line type at the command line, and it launches the line type manager. The line type manager shows all of the line types currently in use in the drawing, and you can see I've just got a plain blank drawing here that only has the continuous line type loaded here. So if I want to load additional line types, I'll go up here to load, and then it looks in the acad.lin file. You'll see here that it has a list of all of the AutoCAD or all of the line types associated right now with AutoCAD. Anything that says ISO is an International Standards Organization file, used in Japan, China, that kind of stuff. And then down here at the bottom where we have all the named ones, batting, border, border 2, so on and so on, these are mostly imperial size line types that are used basically for drawings drawn in inches. If I wanted to load one, I would simply click on it, choose OK, and it loads it into the drawing. From here I could set it current, or I could do that type of thing. However, it's actually a better option to use the layers to set line types. So if I wanted to set a line type, the better way to do it is to go to the layer and change the line type of the layer here. So notice right now it says continuous is my line type. If I click on there, you'll see now that because I loaded border, it's here. But if I wanted to load additional line types, you just click on load. I could go to whatever, other line type that I wanted to load. I could say, like the divide 2, choose OK. And now both of those are loaded so that I could actually do that. So I'm going to go ahead and set the border line type current, say OK. Notice now that layer 0 has that border line type associated with it. And when I draw lines or polylines, you'll notice that it actually draws that border style line. So now looking at the line type itself, if we look at it a little bit closely, you see what it has is it has a repeating pattern. It has a dash, a space, a dash, a space, a dot, a space, and then it starts over again with that dash. So our line type pattern starts here at the beginning of this dash and ends right here at the beginning of that pattern again. So it's dash, space, dot, space, and then it starts over again here. What happens is if I'm drawing a line that's not long enough to have all of that set in there, you'll notice that at some point in time when my pattern gets long enough, it will automatically create a pattern. So this line right here isn't long enough to have dash, space, dot, space. And so it just makes it one continuous line. However, when I stretch this out and make it a little bit longer, you'll notice now that it's got enough space to have dash, space, dot, space, and then it starts over again. And so this is actually a little bit longer than this pattern. If I were to measure, if I were just to do this and say move it up here, and maybe I'll get it close so that we can kind of compare them. I'll make this one a little bit longer. Notice that this one's a little bit longer than that one. So what it does is it adds a little bit of line to this end and a little bit of line to this end so that it mimics that same pattern. But it's exactly right in the middle, and then the end dash is a little longer and the other end dash is a little bit longer. If this was a shorter line, again, notice that if I make it shorter like this, it doesn't have enough room for that entire definition to fit inside of here, so it just makes it one continuous line. If I need this line to have that same pattern, the best way to modify this is to pick the line itself, go to the Properties dialog box, and then change the line type scale to something a little bit smaller. I'll make it like 0.75, press enter. Now notice that again, this one mimics that pattern. It's just now that the dashes are 3/4 of the length of these. The space here is 3/4 of the length of that one. because I had changed it to 0.75. You only want to change line type scale on individual lines. Don't do it as a global thing. So if right now I have nothing selected, notice up here it says no selection, my line type scale is 1. Okay, you don't want to change this on a global scale. You just want to pick the object one at a time and change the scale as necessary on those individual items. So let's look a little bit more at how these line types are actually generated. AutoCAD has a line type file called acad.lin that defines all of the line types available in AutoCAD. And I've already brought it up so that we can look at it here. This is our AutoCAD line type definition file. And just like the Lisp files, anything that follows a semicolon is a comment. So it's the files, or the computer program is going to ignore all of this. It's just so that we can read it and know what's going on. But then down here where there are no semicolons, these are the line types as they're defined. So now we'll talk more about the structure of the file itself in a minute, but notice that there's a space here. Spaces are ignored, or this empty row here is ignored. Okay, this empty row here is ignored, and so on. If we go down and look at it, they've just kind of divided the lines up a little bit. So you see that they've got border, border 2, and border times 2. The only difference here is the length of the line. So if we look at border, the length of that first dash is a 1/2 inch long. If we look at border 2, the length of that first dash is a 1/4 of an inch long. If we look at border times 2, the length of that first dash is 1 inch long. So it's the same pattern. It's just that the distances of each of the spaces here have been modified. If I scroll down a little bit further, you'll see now that we've got the ISO standard line type files, okay? And this says 12 and -3, which is, in millimeters if you're in ISO, but if you're in inches, it's 12 inches and -3 inches. And that's why these are, for use in places that use metrics. If you're doing a drawing in metric, you're going to use these line types rather than the ones above. And then we've got some complex line types here, like fence line tracks, and so on. We're going to look at this in another video. And then down at the bottom, there are user-defined line types. If you would like to add your own custom line types, you can do it down here at the bottom of this. And then every time you migrate from whatever version of AutoCAD you're using now to the latest version, it will automatically bring those line types over. I'm going to show you how to, if you wanted to type them in here, you can, but I'm going to show you how to save them as individual files and get them to load. That way it makes it a little easier to share just a single line type with somebody rather than having to share this entire file. So if I come back up to the top, the very first one that they have here is this border line type. And to make things a little bit easier, what I've done is I've just copied that straight away over here into this Notepad document here. Now, if you're going to be creating your own line type files, you're going to want to use something like Notepad or Notepad++ to create these files. You cannot use something like Microsoft Word because it has to be able to save in the ASCII style format. So I suggest using Notepad to create these. It's super easy. It comes with Windows, and you can do that. So now looking at the format of the line type file, you'll notice that there are only 2 lines in a line type file. Okay, only 2 lines, and that's all there will ever be, is the 2 lines. The first line is the title line. It gives the title of it and then a description, and then the second line here describes the line itself. If I had another one, I could start it off right below this line right here, right below the A, and it would be another one, and it would recognize it as another line. So now looking at the format itself, okay, if we take this first one, this first line, every new line type file has to start with the star, okay? That's how it recognizes, hey, this is a new definition. I need to look at this a little bit more closely for the computer. So every time we have a new line type definition, it starts with a star. The next thing is the title of the line type itself. In this case, it's border. Now, if we go back to the other file, you'll notice that AutoCAD, the programmers at AutoCAD, always give the name of the line type itself, the name in all capital letters. Okay, notice it's all capital letters here. If I scroll down here, it's all capital letters down here. Okay, and there's no, it doesn't have to be that way, but it's just the way they do it so that it's consistent with all the different line types. So if you create your own line type, I suggest that you go ahead and do the same thing. When you give it a title, give it that title in all capital letters. Then it's followed by a comma. This file is what we call a comma delineated file, so the spaces are not necessarily important. You don't want to leave spaces in here. So the title is border, and then it knows that the description is going to begin because there's a comma, and then now what we have here is the description. So this highlighted part here is the description of this called border. So it calls it border, and then it allows it to be title case. Notice it's just a capital B and then lowercase order. And then it has a space here just to delineate the title again from the actual description. And then what AutoCAD does is they give it a graphical description just using keyboard stuff. So these are like underscore, space, and then a period, and then a space, and then it starts over again. It's just meant to represent the line itself. It's not exactly what it would look like, but you get the idea. Now, instead of this, you don't have to put a description at all if you don't want to, but you could, or you could put instead, you could put a description here like use this for the borders, or you could only do just the graphical part and not the actual name part. But again, to stay with that AutoCAD standard, the way they have it done, I suggest you do the star, the title in all caps, comma, and then the description kind of as they've done here. After you get done, you go to the second row, which has to begin with A. Okay, so this is the alignment field, A, and AutoCAD only supports alignment codes A. Okay, there are other types of alignment codes in other programs, but AutoCAD only starts the alignment code A. So regardless of what you want to do, that first or the second line here has to have the A to start with, and then the comma. And then the rest of this is the line type definition. So what you'll notice here is we have positive numbers like 0.5, we have negative numbers like negative 0.25. Okay, so there's a positive number, a negative number, and then we have a 0. So now thinking about this, the 0.5, okay, is the down pin segment. It's positive, it's adding ink to the paper. The negative 0.25 is an up pin segment. It's moving, but it's not adding, it's negative, so it's not adding ink to the paper. Okay, so it's down pin for 1/2 of an inch, up pin for 1/4 of an inch, down pin for 1/2 of an inch, up pin for 1/4 of an inch, and then a 0 creates a dot, and then up pin for 1/4 of an inch, which brings us to right here. And then because that's the end of the definition, it starts over again right here and just repeats that pattern as many times as is necessary to complete the pattern. And that's it. If you want to create a simple line type, it's just going to have down pin segments, up pin segments, and maybe dots. It doesn't have to have any. So if I wanted to create my own line type file, I would come in here and I would say, let's create a new, and I don't want to save that. Oops, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to say, let's create a new one, and I don't want to save that. So now I'm going to call this new line type. I'll just call it INDR 20B. So I'll say star INDR 20B, and that's the title of it. And then I'll say comma, and then I'll give it the name INDR 20B, okay, and then I'll give it a description. So to make this easy, I'm going to make something that has like a dash, and then a dot, and then a dash, and then 2 dots, and then it'll start over again. So it'll be like a dash, and then a dot, and then a dash, and then 2 dots, and then it'll start over again. So dash, dot, another dash, and then 2 dots. and then we could repeat that as many times as necessary. Rather than typing it in over and over again, I could just do this. I could say copy this and then paste it, you know, as necessary so that it gets it in there. But you get the idea. So it's line dot line dot dot line dot line dot dot. If I think about it, my line pattern is this one right here. So it's line dot or space dot space line space dot space dot space line. Okay, that's where it starts. So on my second row now, get to the end, press enter. The first thing I have to type in here is the alignment code A followed by a comma. Okay, it's comma delineated. We don't need to have any spaces. So now that down pin segment is going to be like 0.25, comma. The up pin segment, I'll make it 1/8 of an inch, negative 0.125. That's an up pin segment, comma. And now it's got a dot, which is a 0, comma, and then another up pin segment, negative 0.125, comma, and then we've got a down pin segment, so it's 0.25, comma, and then another up pin segment, negative 0.125, comma, a dot, comma, negative 0.125, comma, another dot, comma, and then negative 0.125. Okay, so again, we've got down pin segment here, up pin segment here, okay, the dot here, okay, and then another up pin segment to get to the other side of the dot, and then a down pin segment here, an up pin segment between the dot. We've got our dot, another pin segment between, a dot, and then another up pin segment, and then it starts over again. So this is my entire line type definition. Okay, now in order to make this work and get it to load into AutoCAD, I added an extra enter key here. It's not absolutely necessary, but sometimes it helps it to run. I need to save this, so I'll say File, I'm going to Save As, and I'm going to put it in a place where I know where it is. So I go to Documents, I'm going to put it in my 20B line types folder, and I don't want to save it as a TXT file. So notice it says text documents here. I need to change this to an all files, and then I'll call this INDR 20B.lin. Okay, it has to have that line type file code there at the end, so I'll say save. So now I've saved this as a line type file. There's two ways that I can get this into AutoCAD now. Okay, so if I'm here, the first way I can get this into AutoCAD is I can just go to the line type command. Okay, and when it says load, or when it brings this up, I can say load, and then it's asking me to search in the acad.lin, but it's not going to find it in here, okay, because it's not part of that file. So I can go here to cancel that. I can go to File, and then I can browse to where I know this is. So I know that it's in my Documents under INDR 20B, line types, there it is. So I could choose open here and it would load it that way, okay? Or the other thing that I can do is on my options dialog box for files, okay, under support file search path, I can add an additional file, okay? So now this is where it wants to look for everything. So what I can do is I can add another search path here, and I'll browse to that same location. So Documents, INDR 20B, and then line types, OK. So now it's going to look there. I'll say OK. Okay. And so now when I go to line types, okay, and I say load, well, I still have to do the same thing. I have to actually search for it. It'll load. It'll look for it in other ways. So I'll just go ahead and do it this way, just so we can get it in here. So again, here we go. Documents, INDR 20B, line types 20B, open. So now it loads it here. I can click here and say OK. And so now it's loaded it here. If I want to, I can set it current. So now it's the current line type. And when I create my line types, it will now have that new pattern that I created there. So it's, again, it's long, it's a dash, a space, dot, dot, space, right? But again, notice that these on the end may or maybe, this end and this end are longer because this is a rather long pattern. So it kind of has to make up the difference here on the end. Now, one last thing we want to talk about when we're looking at line type styles is this system variable called pLineGen. So if I type in, well, first of all, let's look at a polyline. If I create this with a polyline, and I do this, and I'm going to do what I can to make it super long on the ends, like this, okay? So if I look at this, it's got a super long dash at the end and a super long dash at the end, and I don't have my dots here. And that's the way that it creates this using polylines. However, there's a system variable called pLineGen, P-L-I-N-E-G-E-N, and right now it's turned off, but if I turn that on, okay, notice I turned it on there, 1 is on. When I come in and create polylines now, it's going to start off by making that endpoint really long, but when I get done with the end line and I press enter to tell it that I'm done, it recalculates and only leaves the long parts at the very ends of the line. So notice here now that we've got dots at the center of this rather than, corners, which doesn't make a big deal when we're doing square lines like this. But if I wanted to come in and use the polyline command where I start off with a straight line and then I go to arcs and then maybe back to straight lines or something like that, then this is the advantage, is I get the long section here and the long section here, but in the middle it just keeps it a nice constant pattern so that we don't end up with weird dashes and stuff in the middle of this. It gives it a little bit more of a natural look. So that's the way how you can control how those polylines are generated. This concludes the first video on line types in AutoCAD. The next video that we look at is going to deal with complex line types.